Hello and welcome to CATSweek. I'm Annalise Poorman. During the March 13th meeting of the Monroe County Board of Commissioners, Jail Commander Kyle Gibbons provided an update on the conditions of the current jail.
We've got 214 total jail population, 164 felony, 35 misdemeanor, and we have 15 other holds. Our secure bed count's 183, so well below our standard that we're looking at there for the case there. In the last 48 hours, 21 bookings. There are 15 releases in the last 48 hours. So the numbers themselves, the felony, 164 inmates, that's 77% of our facility. So you can kind of see that pretrial release program being at 35, which is 16% of our facility, is getting people in and out that are safe to come back out, and it's working correctly. So kudos to the judges on that, especially, and all the work that the public defender's office and everybody else does with probation and everything. One issue that I wanted to call to your attention, and we don't talk about this very often because it's just part of the job. When we have people that have to go to the hospital and they have to be admitted to the hospital, our staff has to go to the hospital as well, and that's 24-hour coverage. So I wanted to give a kudos to the facility itself and the people that work there. It's something through the council and giving us that pay raise and giving people incentive to work here, and them providing that work throughout our tenure so far, that everybody's stepping up. The commissioners, the council, the office itself.
Gibbons touched on mental health initiatives for inmates inside the jail. He also said that the jail is fully staffed at the moment.
Looking at our mental health division, are those people providing those medical services through our contract. We have 2 people right now. We always talk about how we're reactive in what we have to do because we're so busy with evaluations, intake, making sure people have proper care. What they've begun to do and what little time they have is they began dialectical behavior therapy, DBT. Essentially, it's a group therapy session that they've worked with 8 to 12 residents, depending on who wants to partake in that. It's not forced. It's something that we're working these people back into a position so they can go into general population, so they can have a normal stay at the facility, so they can have a normal release into the public. They're doing a good job in that. There's incentive-based stuff. We work with them. We just had a cleanest cell competition. These are people that are wanting to get back. They're on their medication. They're working towards that end goal. So when we look into getting more people to help with that process, it only benefits the entire population itself. Staffing report, we're fully staffed. We've had 1 resignation in the last 90 days, and that person just moved back to Northern Indiana, moved back with family. So we're doing a pretty good job in that, in keeping people at the job, and which speaks to the work that all of us have done as a county.
Next, the commissioners heard a contract with Vet Engineering for an environmental site assessment at a property on Hunter Valley Road and West State Road 46. The commissioners are considering the property as a potential site for a new jail. Administrator Angie Purdy presented the agreement.
As you and the council have all agreed that there are issues presented on the Thompson site, you have tasked staff with looking at additional sites and obtaining an environmental site assessment and a site recognizance of the property. And this agreement will provide for that for 2 parcels of land totaling approximately 56.12 acres. And those are located along West Hunter Valley Road and Bloomington in Monroe County, Indiana. And it is, we are not looking to purchase the totality of those 2 parcels. Actually, we're only looking at approximately 43 acres.
The commissioners unanimously approved the contract. On March 12th, the Monroe County Council discussed a strategy to launch a jail transition team. Chief Deputy Sheriff Phil Parker explained why the Sheriff's Department wants to establish the jail transition team.
The transition team is not a group of new employees coming in. They're a group of current employees selected from the jail, and we simply, if that happens to be 6 people, we hire 6 people, train them up, get them ready, fill in at the jail. So that's what we're here to talk to you about. So we're in that phase. I've got a memorandum that DLZ put out in October 10th, and I think you've probably had this at some point. I think I even passed this out in one of our presentations. But it talks about the transition team, and it kind of gives bullet points of what that team actually does. And it's operational, facilities, maintenance, inmate programming. Then it goes through all these different types of things that they go through. And what he talks about is the ideal team design is 5 to 8 people. So we're kind of looking at, the Sheriff and I and Corey have discussed looking at starting this with 6 people and see if we can make that work. And Corey's going to talk about how that team, he had a visit and he's talked to some folks that have done this, how this team shrinks and swells and shrinks and swells. It's not always going to be this constant transition team going to work every day and doing their business.
Jail Transition Director Corey Grass said he toured a facility in Franklin County, Ohio, and that he wanted to implement a transition team with a similar focus.
They have a sign on their wall in their transition office where they all sit that says, "Repetition does not establish validity," and they use that to challenge themselves all the time. Anytime they kind of got in that rut of, we've always done it that way, even the guys who ran the program would get challenged on it and realize, yeah, that's a bad precedent to set. So we kind of went with that theme as well. I love the idea that we're going to try new things. We may not be able to afford all those things. It may not work for our specific community, but we at least, I feel like we need to talk about them, think about them, see what they're doing, and see if it would work here.
Parker continued with an overview of the new jail transition.
I told you that we're in the pre-design phase, and that's scheduled for 3 months. That pre-design phase essentially started March 1st, for all intents and purposes, because that's what it is, going to these places and figuring this out. So now what is today, the 12th? So we're already, by the end of this week, we're going to be 2 weeks into that 3-month period. If we decided today to start backfilling these positions, the quickest we could get new hires in, get them hired, trained, up to speed, ready to roll so we could start pulling people out for the transition team is 8 weeks. And I'm telling you, that's the fast track if we started today. So now we're 2 weeks in, now you add 10 weeks. So now we're already almost halfway through our process. So this is where I just want to emphasize that's where we're at and that's our timeline. So here's what I would throw at you. I know we've talked about this. We're kind of settling on 6 here to see how we can make it work. That we don't want to start big and then have to scale down. We want to start somewhere in the middle where we know we can manage that and use those folks to get to the ends that we need. But I want to talk about ARPA funding, and this is where maybe you're going to have to steer me off because I'm a neophyte at best. But when we brought Corey's position to the forefront, we kind of stalled until we figured out the funding mechanism. And the ARPA funds, at least from his position, didn't levy local tax dollars. It came from that specific. It came from there, and we could use it for that specific purpose. I think Baker and Tilly helped us with that. But what it did, for us, it quickly closed the gap between the concept of having a transition team director on staff and the ability to make it happen almost immediately once that decision was made. I think within 2 weeks we had the contract. Molly had helped us with that, and he started January 1st. Now, I'll say this with caution, but when the ARPA funding was approved by the commissioners on November 29th, there was a agreement, I guess, or some comments made that they were not in favor of using ARPA funding for any other transition team members. So from a layperson's perspective, that was a very quick means for us to have the concept, get the concept on paper, get Corey hired and get him working. So I'm asking, how do we make this go as quickly as we can so that we can get out of talking about this transition team, get these people in, get them hired so we can start shuffling people off to Corey when he needs them at his disposal.
Councilmember Pete Iverson said he sympathizes with the sense of urgency for the initiative.
I intentionally brought the pony training booklet with me because I need to remind myself of just how much information was jammed through our brains. And I've got it turned to chapter number 10, which is all about transition teams. And it makes a really good point that transition is not a one-time event, it's a process. And it's the only process that goes from planning all the way to post-move-in. And so I absolutely understand, and it comports with what I heard at the pony training, that we need to move now so that we're prepared. So once we start doing the design work after the pre-design phase, that we have folks in place so that we can make sense of it. And I think the thing that I would add with what I heard in the training was, it's not just that we have lock manufacturers and furniture manufacturers, but it's that we have policies and procedures for training staff in a new facility so that everyone's safe. And again, I am not the person to be leading this team. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here, but I wanted to make that point that at least in terms of timing, the time is right now.
Councilmember Jeff McKim suggested that they could use local income tax revenue earmarked for mental health services in the jail as a funding mechanism for the project.
The jail tax that we've already established raises about $35,000 a month, which would come pretty close. It fits pretty well. It may not be quite enough, and maybe a little high depending on how the numbers come out. But that might be an opportunity. We already have, of course, you need to maintain an operating balance in any fund that has salaries, but we'll essentially already have 3 months of an operating balance in the jail tax if we size this appropriation to match approximately the revenue that's coming in.
Councilmember Jennifer Crossley said she agreed with McKim and preferred to use funding from local income taxes rather than using American Rescue Plan Act funds.
I was thinking along the lines of the correctional tax, such as what we did before for, is it the mental health, the contract that we just did for the jail. That was kind of my reason of thinking is we could use what we did there for funding for this as well, because obviously ARPA is a term limited and it only lasts us for so long.
Sheriff Ruben Marte urged the council for their continued support on the jail transition.
Thank you for being understanding and patient with us. This is new territory, and we're learning as you are as well. But we'll give our word. We'll be transparent. Period. And we need you for us to move forward with this. But it's going to be a long journey. So it's going to be baby steps in the beginning, but it's going to move quickly. And we do need the support. So thank you.
The Monroe County Council will meet again on March 26th. At their March 12th meeting, the Bloomington Board of Public Works heard a contract with Fire Service Incorporated for the purchase of an aerial apparatus. Deputy Fire Chief Max Litwin explained the intended purpose of the contract.
This is a 100-foot aerial truck that will be put into frontline service to protect Bloomington. We have one in reserve that is approaching not being serviceable anymore, so this will allow us to take one of our frontline rigs, put it into reserve, and have a new one to service as a new frontline rig.
Board President Kyla Cox-Deckard provided some background information on the agenda item.
We discussed this quite a bit in the work session yesterday, understood that this was an item that we had put in a request for, but still had some paperwork and some budgetary functions to take care of. So the vendor put us on hold, said they couldn't fulfill it at this time. Ultimately, it became available again to the city of Bloomington, so this is our opportunity to secure this important piece of equipment.
The board approved the contract unanimously. City Corporation Counsel Margie Rice asked the board to approve a contract with Action Target for $200,000 to update the police shooting range facility.
This shooting range, which is actually called the Bloomington Public Safety Training Center, at 3230 South Walnut Street, was built in 2008. It's in need of some upgrades from the company that originally put it in place, which is Action Target. And the upgrades are going to total, I little over $200,000. It is a sole source contract because this is proprietary equipment that will be updated by that same company. And that sole source was approved last year by the controller, and they actually scheduled and did most of the upfront work last year on this. And because this company schedules way in advance, we didn't do the contract until it got a little closer. So here we are.
Cox Deckard asked if the money was in the 2024 budget. Rice explained that the money is in the budget and has been earmarked for this contract.
Yes, public safety lit money. When I talked to Julie Martindale in the controller's office, she said there was about $614,000 in there, and they had kind of earmarked this 203 to come out of that. And I thought you asked a great question yesterday at the work session, which is, does this have anything to do with Showers West? And the answer is no. This is a completely different facility. No changes other than maintenance and upgrades were planned.
The board approved the contract unanimously. At the Ellisville Town Council meeting on March 11th, Fire Chief Kevin Patton presented an award to firefighter and EMT Matthew Seabott for administering life-saving first aid at the site of a car crash that occurred in February.
On February 8th, 2024, Captain Matthew Seabott was traveling to Indianapolis with his family for a visit to the Children's Museum. While on Kentucky Avenue, near the intersection of Mooresville Road, he came upon a vehicle accident that had just occurred. An Indianapolis Metropolitan Police officer had stopped in a travel lane with lights activated to clear a mattress from the road that had come out of another vehicle. Moments later, a second police officer arrived traveling to work, and another vehicle, for an unknown reason, came into contact with that officer, causing a crash. The collision forced the second officer's vehicle to roll over, trapping the officer upside down in the car. The vehicle sustained heavy damage, causing the officer to have obvious traumatic injuries. Captain Seabott arrived just after the impact happened, stopping and identifying himself as a firefighter with the Ellisville Fire Department. The other officer, not seriously injured in the accident, reported to Captain Seabott that he believed the entrapped officer needed immediate assistance and he could not find a pulse. Captain Seabott, without hesitation, began to care for the injured officer with the assistance from the police officer on the scene. They removed the officer from the damaged vehicle and found that he did not have a pulse and was not breathing. Captain Seabott, with the officer's assistance, removed the officer's protective vest and began CPR. With little medical equipment, Captain Seabott was able to stabilize the officer's airway, and before the ambulance and fire crews arrived, they were able to restore the officer's pulses and respirations. Statements from the paramedics and IMPD officers on the scene that day made it very clear to the Ellisville Fire Department that had Captain Seabott not stopped and rendered aid that day to the officer's outcome would have been very different, if not fatal. So I present Matthew Seabott to the Town Council.
Later in the meeting, Town Attorney Darla Brown explained the water rate approval that the town received from the Indiana Regulatory Committee. The rate the town requested was not approved, but they were granted a slight increase in rates by the committee.
This ordinance is the rates that were actually approved, and I believe that these have been posted on the town's website since the last meeting.
Town Manager Mike Farmer explained that this is phase one of the water rate increase, and he gave some examples of what their average customer's bill will look like.
I wanted to mention that this is phase one of the rate increase. Phase two will be implemented once we start the construction of the new Department of Public Works building, and that will phase in, and then we'll add an additional 8.5% to the bill. Just so everybody wonders what kind of raise it is dollar-wise, current rates are $18.72 for water minimum bill. The approved rate will be $23.94. And if everybody's used to just looking at their bill with water and sewer on it, it'll raise the old bill with water and sewer on it and storm from $58.97 to $64.96. That includes storm, water, and sewer. So a 4,500 gallon user, which is the average for our customers. A current rate's $27.30, and the approved rate will be $34.97 for water.
The council unanimously approved the water rate increase. Next, Monroe County Council member Trent Deckard spoke to the town council, asking them to approve the continuation of funding for rural transit.
Due to this change in how the state has interpreted federal rules towards rural transit, the county has come forward with $88,000 to continue rural transit in these affected areas that we've talked about for some time. You have committed through the first 3 months of the year, and I apologize if I'm telling you what you already know, but I think it's important to not only mention that, but celebrate that. Thank you for doing that. But there's still an amount that is uncertain for the patrons of this community that I represent alongside you, our mutual constituents. And so I'm here just as one member of the area to make an impassioned plea that the town consider the remaining year and funding that year. Specifically, I would just add to this conversation some things that have probably been said a million times before, but I think are incredibly important. Mobility for all of our constituents we represent is not only a vital thing, it is a necessary thing. People have chosen to be in our communities, both Monroe County and Ellettsville. Many of them made those decisions knowing rural transit was an option for them. I have family here. We have considerable history, all of us in this community, and we know, and sometimes don't know, individuals that are affected by this. And so I would just finally, on my portion, just say the following. I don't want to speak too long here when others can speak better than I can, is that as one member of this, as a county council member, I'm committed to doing whatever you need us to do to try to be the best partner possible in this effort that was not handed down by the county, was given to us by the state, and give us and do whatever we can do to make this happen.
Monroe County Commissioner Julie Thomas implored the council to assist with funding even if the budget is tight.
These are people who need to get to the doctor, who need to get to the pharmacy, who need to get to the grocery store, and have no other way of doing it. Rural transit will be here, no matter what. But whether or not they can serve your residents in Ellettsville is in question. And that is our biggest concern. That is our biggest concern because, of course, they are Monroe County residents, and we want to do what we can to help them. So I will say that we are moving forward with combined meetings between Monroe County Council Representative, Councilor Deckard, myself, a couple of members of your great town council. We are going to be meeting regularly. We have a meeting on Friday, and we are going to be figuring out what happens in 2025. This is just to get us through 2024. But to take that off the table will mean that we have more time and energy to devote to coming up with the best solution possible for 2025 and beyond.
Area 10 Agency on Aging Executive Director Chris Myers outlined the cost of running the service in Ellettsville until the end of 2024.
I want to give you an update from January and February trips because I like to talk logistics here. So you'll remember that when we talked about the need for Ellettsville's contribution for the full cost parallel service for 2024, we looked at 8,000 trips for the whole area, 4,800 that would be urban to urban for Ellettsville. And so that amount was for that particular amount of trips. Based on January and February so far, When you subtract the fares, we have about $20,000 left after February's trips. So I think that's going to buy us into April for sure, which is good news for this particular conversation. But I also want to say, January and February typically are lower usage months. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to carry forward to an average of the rest of the year. If we did have trips average about 260 per month for the rest of the year instead of 400. We're looking at really a total of just about $43,000 more needed to cover Ellettsville between now and the end of 2024 to, like Julie said, buy us time to come up with that long-term solution that we know we need to have.
During public comment, many Ellettsville residents detailed the ways that they rely on rural transit. Council member Dan Swafford said that this decision is one of the most important he's ever made during his time on the council and asked his fellow council members to approve its funding.
I've been on the council 20 years, and I really think this is one of the most important decisions that I've had to make. I know that things that I've done on this council affects a lot of people here, like police officers, firemen, the street people, but this personally affects you guys out there, and there's a lot more out there that couldn't make it tonight. So I would plead with the rest of my council to at least fund this the rest of the year until we can come up for permanent funding from then on out. So hang in there, guys. We can do this.
Council member William Ellis said that he was hopeful that funding for the service could come from economic development local income tax revenue. Council member Scott Oldham said that this is difficult because the town has never run a bus service and does not have a budget for it.
The town of Ellettsville does not run a transportation service. As we've just heard, City of Bloomington has a transportation service that they get funding for. The county, although de facto, so I understand Trent and everyone else who came, please forgive me for pointing you out, have a bus service. The town of Ellettsville has never run a bus service, ever run a bus service, nor do we have a funding stream for said bus service. And this becomes very hard decisions because it is deserving for people to have transportation. But I'll take it back to something that's a little closer to home for all of us. No, and I'll just leave it at that. There are other priorities that towns and cities have amongst the general welfare of the public, whether that be sewer, whether that be water, whether that be trash collection, whether that be whatever else. And just as though the town and the county do not offer trash collection, the City of Bloomington does. There's a funding stream for that. There's not a funding stream for transportation in the town of Ellettsville.
The council voted to amend their memorandum of understanding with rural transit to extend their services until the money that they have already set aside is depleted. Oldham said that they will revisit the funding structure further after they receive firm numbers from the Economic Development Local Income Tax. The council will revisit their funding strategy at the next meeting. And that is all for CATSweek. Thank you for joining us. For CATS and WFHB, I'm Annalise Poorman.